Hey, here's Nancy Drew. It's me, Arglefumph. This is another parody story. This one's based on Nancy Drew, Curse of Blackmoor Manor. Only I call it Nancy Drew, Worst of Blackmoor Manor. Chapter 1, Opening Letter. Dear Ned, greetings from jolly old England. Only right now I'm not too sure about the jolly part. That's because I was supposed to be on a flight to Britain. I have no idea why the plane landed in England instead. I'm here because of our neighbor, Mrs. Petroff. She's the one on the corner with those annoying small dogs who bark all the time. Apparently her daughter Linda just married a British diplomat named Hugh Penvellyn. Ever since then, Linda has become bedridden and grouchy. Mrs. Petroff wants me to find out why. I don't know all the details yet, but I'm thinking of calling this the case of the missing aspirin. Hugh's aunt, Mrs. Drake, is running the manor in his absence. The only other person living there is Hugh's 12-year-old daughter, Jane. I'm told that Jane is obsessed with games. She once spent 9 hours in a row playing tic-tac-toe against her guinea pig. Mrs. Drake needs to get her some help. So, here I am. I'm about to be dropped at Blackmoor's Blackmoor. I can't tell if the butterflies in my stomach are because I'm excited or just a tad creeped out. Talk to you soon, I hope. Nancy. P.S. I don't know how I'll send you this letter. The lady at the post office said I had to pay in pounds, but I don't have any money which is heavy enough. Chapter 2. Meeting Linda. Good night, miss, and good luck, the man said as he kicked Nancy out of his taxicab. Try not to get eaten by the Blackmoor beast. Blackmoor say what now? Nancy asked, but it was too late. The man drove away at a surprisingly high speed. Nancy shrugged, picked up her luggage, then walked down the short lane to the manor's front door. Nancy, a voice growled as she reached the door. Startled, Nancy turned around, but she saw nothing. Hello? Is someone there? Nancy asked. A pair of angry red eyes appeared in the bushes, accompanied by another growl. Nancy shrieked, "It's the Hound of the Baskervilles!" and smashed the door handle multiple times. An elderly British woman answered the door. Yes? There's a beast here which is going to eat me! Nancy cried, pointing at the red eyes. But to her great astonishment, the eyes had disappeared, and she could see nothing but darkened bushes. The woman scoffed. Come in, she said impatiently. I'm Mrs. Drake. I take it you are Nancy Drew? That's my name. Don't wear it out, Nancy said as she stepped inside with her luggage. And I'm not making things up. I really did see something out there. The woman scoffed again. People are always seeing and hearing things on the moor at night, especially you Americans. Why don't you go up to your room? It's the one with the moon on the door. I get my own room? Awesome! Nancy said. I'd like to see Linda, if I could. I'm afraid Linda is not quite ready to meet with you just now. But please, come see me after you've unpacked. I'll be in the conservatory. All right, thank you, Nancy said. She lugged her luggage upstairs to the Bridget Penvellyn room, then collapsed on the bed, exhausted. Naturally, after her 10-plus hour flight, Nancy had a horrible case of jet lag, and over the Atlantic Ocean, and Nancy sat up after 20 seconds. Okay, I'm all better, she said. Time to solve the mystery of why Linda is so grumpy. Nancy left her room and stumbled out into the hallway. Next to her room was a circular staircase. She put her foot on the bottom step, and the staircase made a loud whoop sound. Nancy jumped backwards and continued down the hallway. After taking a right at the creepy-looking gargoyle, she heard angry shouting coming from behind a door. Oh, forget it! Some husband you're turning out to be, the voice said. Nancy used her amazing detective skills to determine that, since the speaker was a grumpy female with an American accent and a newlywed husband, it must be Linda. No, it's not all in my head! Ugh, don't bother! There's nothing but silence after that. Nancy politely knocked on the door, then entered. The room was dark, besides for a small table with a light on it. This was next to a large bed, which had its curtains drawn. "Whoever was inside the room just now has disappeared," Nancy said aloud. "This could end up being a difficult mystery after all." Well, 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 if it isn't Nancy Drew, our friendly neighborhood detective," a familiar female voice said. "Who said that?" Nancy said, whirling around. "Who are you? Where are you hiding?" "It's me, Linda Penvellyn," Linda said. "The person you're here to, investigate? I'm in the bed." "Oh," Nancy said. "I can't see you. Let me pull back the curtains and—" "Don't touch the curtains!" Linda snapped. "I don't want anyone to see me!" "Why not?" Nancy asked. "Is something wrong?" "Heh, is something wrong with me? I'm tired all the time, my vision is blurry, but that doesn't matter." Oh, that's a typo. Ooh, sorry about that. Let me try that again. "I'm tired all the time, my vision is blurry, but that doesn't matter, Nancy. Here's what's important. There are some doors which must never be opened. There are some secrets which must never be learned. That's all." Someone from outside knocked on the door. "Mummy, can I come in?" a girl's voice said. "No, you're supposed to be in your lessons," Linda said. "Lessons are over. I want to meet Nancy." "I said no, Jane." "Okay," Jane said sadly. Nancy could hear her footsteps as she walked away. "Was that Mrs. Drake?" Nancy wondered. "That was my stepdaughter, Jane. She can be such a pest sometimes," Linda said. "Anyway, I understand if you feel an obligation to my mother, but trust me, there's nothing you can do. You can stay here as long as you like, but I strongly recommend leaving as soon as possible." "I can't go home now," Nancy said. "I just arrived here in England. I want to meet Peter Pan before going back home. Do you know where he lives?" There was no response. "Linda?" Nancy asked. Again, Linda didn't say anything. Huh. Guess she fell asleep. Maybe a nap will improve her mood. Chapter 3. Jane and the Lady in Black. As Nancy exited Linda's room, she got a phone call from Mrs. Petroff. "Hello, Nancy. It's Mrs. Petroff. How are things going? Have you seen Linda yet?" "I just spoke with her," Nancy said. "Great! Have you solved the mystery of why she's grumpy and refuses to talk to everyone?" "No." "Why not?" "Because she's grumpy and she refuses to talk to me," Nancy said. "This could be my hardest mystery yet." "You can do it, Nancy. I believe in you," Mrs. Petroff said. "And I'm not paying for your flight back home until you solve the mystery." "I've only been here 10 minutes. Cut me some slack," Nancy said. "I'm sure I'll figure out what's wrong with Linda. What did the doctors say?" "They say she's perfectly healthy, besides for some dry skin, which is not unusual for her. But she's not acting like the daughter I know and love. Something has changed her, Nancy. Something in that house. I don't know if it's the Blackmoor Beast or what. Just figure it out." "The Blackmoor Beast?" "It's a local legend. People say there's a wolf-like creature which protects Blackmoor Manor and keeps strangers away. When I mentioned it to Linda, she changed the subject immediately." Nancy said. "I'll keep that in mind. Thanks for the help, Mrs. Petroff. Goodbye, Nancy." Nancy hung up the phone. She didn't know much about the Blackmoor Beast, but she remembered seeing a Disney movie about a monstrous beast who lived in a spooky castle. The beast kidnapped the best-looking woman in town by holding her father hostage. Also, there were singing candles. Maybe the beast is holding Linda's father hostage, Nancy thought to herself. She went to Jane's room, knocked on the door, then let herself in. Jane looked just like the picture Nancy had seen, gangly and pale, with large eyes. "Hi, you must be Nancy. I'm so glad you're here. Let's play a game," Jane said breathlessly. Not right now. Maybe later," Nancy said. "I'd like to ask about Linda, if I could." "Sure. What do you want to know about Mummy? She's been a bit out of sorts lately. I do hope you'll cheer her up." "I tried, but it didn't work," Nancy said. "Has she always acted like this?" "No, she was fine when she moved in here," Jane said. but she started feeling poorly after I saw the lady in black. Who? Some lady dressed in all black snuck into the manor one night and left a note on Mummy's nightstand. That's when Mummy started feeling poorly. A new suspect, Nancy thought. The lady in black is responsible for Linda's odd behavior? Who is she? I couldn't see her face because she wore a cape with a hood, Jane said. I don't want to talk about it, though. Let's play a game. Sure, what games do you have? I have Go Fish, Jane said proudly. Oh, gee, look at the time, Nancy said. Mrs. Drake said she wanted to speak with me. See you later, Jane. Nancy drew Worst of Blackmoor Manor, a story by Arglefumph. Chapter 4, The Curse. Nancy returned to Linda's room. Linda, Jane told me about the lady in black. What lady in black? She never said anything to me about a lady in black, Linda said. That kid is so weird, I just don't get her. So you never received any mysterious notes on your nightstand? Well, someone did leave something. But it's none of your concern. What's done is done, and you can't help me. Please, Linda, I can't solve this mystery without your help, Nancy pleaded. Was it the Blackmoor beast? Did he kidnap your father and torture you with cheesy musical numbers until you gave in? What? Linda started chuckling lightly. Nice try, but I'm not saying anything. It's too dangerous. Dangerous? Do you realize how many times I've almost been killed while solving mysteries? Nancy asked. So far, I've been attacked by ghost dogs, roller coasters, killer whales, and an angry chicken. Not to mention all the murderers, kidnappers, and criminals who tried to kill me in order to keep their secrets. I think I can handle a British mansion. Fine, Linda sighed. I'll tell you what happened, but don't blame me if you get cursed. Cursed? Nancy asked. I was exploring a hidden passageway in the manor when I found a plaque. There was a detailed curse written on it. I tried to laugh it off, but it was really unnerving. When I returned to my room later that day, I found a note on my nightstand. On it was written the exact same curse. So you're feeling bad because someone cursed you, Nancy summarized. Do you still have the piece of paper? I'd like to read it. I burned it and threw it away. I don't know why I'm telling you this. You can't help me. Sure I can, Nancy said. Where's the hidden passageway? I want to see the cursed plaque. I won't tell you. I've already caused my own doom. I won't cause yours, too. Then can you at least tell me what the curse said? Nancy asked. The witch who lived here. She turned her husband into the Blackmoor beast. She'll turn me into a monster, too. Nancy, you must escape before it's too late. Linda, you're overreacting. Maybe it was just a prank. Prank nothing! This place is dangerous! Linda said. Go home, Nancy! Save yourself! Nancy decided it would be best if she didn't disturb Linda any further. She said goodbye and left the room quickly. Linda's being dramatic. There's nothing creepy here which is going to pop out at me. On the other side of the door, waiting for Nancy, was an orange-haired woman with a ponytail. Nancy jumped in surprise. Where did you come from? She gasped. The woman smiled creepily. Hello, Nancy. I am Ethel. Uh-oh, it's Ethel! Scary times, everybody! Chapter 5, Ethel. I'm Jane's tutor, Ethel said. Jane is very excited you're visiting. You're all she's talked about for the past month. Really? I didn't know I had a fan club out here. Yes, we are very interested in what you will discover here at Blackmoor, Ethel said. But a word of caution. Only the initiates are allowed to discover Ranulph the Red's secret. Ranulph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? Nancy asked. Keep your search focused on Linda. There's no need for you to go exploring elsewhere. Why, who knows what terrible things could happen to you were you to venture outside the safety of these halls. Is that a threat? It was a pleasure meeting you, Nancy. Our paths will cross again, I'm sure. Ethel then used her creepy ninja powers to disappear in a flash of smoke. In reality, all she did was walk away, but Nancy wasn't really paying attention, so it looked like Ethel vanished. Nancy marched over to Jane's room and threw open the door. "Jane, you have the creepiest tutor ever," Nancy declared. "Miss Ethel isn't so bad," Jane said. "She's mostly just strict, and she makes me do all this boring homework. I'd much rather play games all day." "Me too," Nancy said. "So I followed up on that lead you gave me about the lady in black. It turns out that she appeared right after Linda explored a hidden passageway." "You mean the one by the East Hall?" Jane asked. Yeah, the hidden passageway in the East Hall, which I totally know about," Nancy said. "But hypothetically, if I didn't know about it, how would I get inside?" "You need the key, but if you want it, you'll have to play a game with me. That's the rule." "Or I could borrow a key from one of the adults who live here," Nancy thought. "Okay, what's your game?" Jane pulled out a game named Bull, which Nancy played in Nancy Drew, Secret of the Scarlet Hand. "I got this from a neat museum in the States, with this weirdo who's always talking about aliens and Diet Cola. The goal of the game is to land on the other player's pieces." It took 3 years for Nancy to win the game, or that's what it felt like. The game didn't require her to do anything besides press the roll button over and over again. It wasn't very exciting. As a reward for winning, Nancy got the key to the East Hall. "It's not a very interesting secret passageway. You're going to be totally bored," Jane said. "Wouldn't you rather play a game with me instead?" "Oh, I'm not falling for that again," Nancy decided. Out of spite, Nancy stole a book from Jane's room. The book was entitled Lycanthropes and You: What to Do When Someone You're Investigating is Turning into a Centuries-Old Werewolf. Nancy put the book in her bag, and she promptly forgot about it. After that, Nancy walked over to the East Hall. As she rounded the corner, a voice cried out, "We're going to hurt you, Nancy Drew!" Oh no, Nancy's in serious danger again. Chapter 6, Hidden Passageway 1. Nancy fell over in fright and started crying to herself for 9 minutes, until she got the strength to get back up again. That's when she learned the mysterious voice was a parrot. "Ha!" the parrot said. Scared you! "That wasn't very nice, Mrs. Parrot." "My name is Loulou! 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 Loulou!" "Okay, I get it. Your name is Loulou." Loulou. "So, Lou, can you help me solve this mystery?" Nancy asked. "Not Lou! Loulou! Loulou! Loulou!" Nancy scoffed. "I'll just solve this mystery on my own," she said, sounding way too confident for someone who had no idea what she was doing. The door to the East Hall had a fancy plaque on it. Nancy examined it, then opened the door. The room itself was rather empty, besides for a gargoyle statue, a hat rack, a framed photograph of Mrs. Drake and her brother meeting the Queen, and a dragon. "Yay, dragon!" Nancy said. She played around with the dragon statuette, and to her surprise, the hands moved. Nancy instantly recognized this as a puzzle, in which she had to position the hands to match the plaque on the door. Nah, I'm just kidding. Nancy played around with the dragon for about 20 seconds, and she stumbled on the solution by pure luck. The dragon growled, and the back wall of the room ascended into the ceiling, revealing a dark passageway. Nancy walked to the edge of the passageway and looked inside. It's too dark for me to go exploring," she said. "I'm going to need a flashlight." Nancy turned to leave, but she tripped over her untied shoelaces and fell sideways into the passageway. She tried getting back up, but she tripped again and fell down 3 sets of stairs. When she opened her eyes again, Nancy found herself in complete darkness. "No! How will I escape?" Nancy said. "I'm going to be trapped in this dark, bottomless pit forever!" Dramatic music played after this dire proclamation. "Oh, wait, I have a cell phone," Nancy said, pulling the device out of her pocket. She used the glow from the screen as a sort of flashlight, and it let her see the stairs that led to the exit. More importantly, Nancy saw a plaque. It wasn't the plaque she was looking for, sadly. Instead of a curse, this plaque had a picture of Loulou on it, with the word barber on top. At the bottom were some movable tiles, which allowed her to enter her own word. Nancy left the hidden passageway, walking very carefully up the stairs. When she was back in the hallway, she found Loulou. "Hey, Loulou, what does the word barber mean?"
"Get a dictionary! Dictionary! Ah!
No, I mean, the hidden passageway has some sort of word thing with your picture on it, Nancy said. It's currently set to barber.
Loulou's magic word game! Loulou's magic word game!
Aha! Nancy said. How do I play the magic word game?
Tell Loulou the magic word!
Please?
Nope, that is incorrect! Loulou want magic word! Magic word! Magic word! A deal's a deal.
Nancy sighed. She was used to being bossed around by other people, but being bossed around by a parrot? This was a new low for her. All right, I'll try to find your magic word. Nancy Drew, Worst of Blackmoor Manor. A story by Arglefumph. Chapter 7, Talking to Linda. Nancy headed down the hallway and walked into Linda's room. Hey, hey, Nancy said. Awesome detective here. Linda didn't say anything. I checked out that hidden passageway you mentioned, Nancy said. I didn't see a cursed plaque, though. All I saw was a parrot plaque. What? Linda asked. How can you call yourself a detective? It was right there, waiting to be found, wanting to be found. It needed someone to find it. Are we talking about the plaque or my friend George? I know she's been looking for a boyfriend for a while now, but that doesn't have anything to do with this case. I'm doomed. Doomed, Linda said. I knew that curse was from the witch, and here's proof. The plaque disappeared as soon as I left the passageway. Calm down, Nancy said. It was dark in the dragon passageway, and I didn't have a flashlight. Maybe I missed the curse? Dragon passageway? Yeah, you know, the passageway behind the burping dragon in the East Hall, Nancy said. Linda breathed a sigh of relief. I was talking about the hidden passageway behind the gargoyle. So there are multiple hidden passageways, Nancy deduced. Perfect. When am I going to solve a mystery in a place which is not an architect's playhouse? The witch built the passageways so she could escape in case soldiers attacked, Linda said. Don't you see? This house is designed to get rid of outsiders. Outsiders like you and me. How do I get inside this passageway? Nancy asked. You move the gargoyle around. I don't know the pattern. I was just fiddling with it, and I came across the solution by accident. I bet I can figure out how the puzzle works, Nancy said. Do you have a flashlight I can use in these hidden passageways? No, Linda said. I never leave my bed. Why would I need a flashlight? Yeah, about that, Nancy said. Why don't you leave your bed? I think you need to get some exercise. I have been cursed and I'm turning into a monster. I have to stay far away from other people. It's for their own good. And mine. You're really starting to worry your husband and mother, Nancy said. But don't worry, Linda. I'll find this plaque thingy and prove that there's no curse. Then you'll be free to leave your room again. I wish you luck, Linda said. Chapter 8. Nigel! It's about time Nigel showed up in this story. Nancy left Linda's room and examined the gargoyle in the corner. She could move it left and right by 90 degrees. After trying out a few patterns, Nancy decided there had to be a clue for the puzzle somewhere. Nancy decided to ask Loulou for more information when she made an amazing discovery. Whoa! Nancy said. There's a downstairs part to the manor. Nancy slid down the banister and examined the lower floor. It had 6 ornate pillars, a maze design on the floor, and a lot of portraits. One of them instantly caught Nancy's eye. Ha ha! Look at the guy with the funny hat, she said. Nancy then noticed a portrait of a man standing by the upstairs gargoyle. This was the only portrait without a coat of arms. Nancy figured this was some sort of clue, but she didn't know what it meant. She decided to ask someone for more information. There were 4 doors in the downstairs area, not including the front door to the manor. Nancy went through the one on the right, and she found herself in a library. A dark-skinned man sat at a desk, typing madly. "Ah, are you from the agency?" he asked. "It's about time." "Agency? What?" "Oh dear, you're not here to help me," the man said. He adjusted his glasses as he turned his focus from the computer to Nancy. "How do you do? I'm Nigel Mukherjee?" "I'm Nancy Drew. I'm a detective who's here to investigate what's wrong with Linda." "I'm a historian researching the Penvellyn family history for a new book I'm writing. Mrs. Drake has graciously opened up the library for me. Not much has been written about the Penvellyns until now." "Oh, neat," Nancy said. "I had some questions about the Penny Bennies. For starters, what's up with the weather forecaster person?" "I'm sorry, to whom are you referring?" "You know, the guy who always predicted when it would rain," Nancy said. "My parents used to sing to me about him when I was younger. Ranulph the Red-Nosed Reindeer." "Ranulph the Red is the family's progenitor," Nigel said. "It is rumored that he had a magic meteorite, which allowed him to win every battle he fought. The government granted him this land in recognition of his military accomplishments." "And what about the witch lady?" "You must be referring to Eleanor Penvellyn, who was burned at the stake in 1650. "Did she really leave the curse of Blackmoor Manor?" "Ha! No!" Nigel said. "Most historians agree that her death was ordered by Cromwell for political reasons." Nancy smiled. She knew Linda wasn't really cursed, so she didn't turn anyone into a werewolf. "That is still unclear," Nigel said. "After her husband disappeared, a large beast was seen prowling the moor at night, and she forbade anyone from hunting it. Some say it was her husband, whom she cursed for finding out too much about the Penvellyn family secret. Others say her husband was in France at the time. I doubt we'll ever know the truth." "I have one last question," Nancy said, not wanting to waste Nigel's time. "Who's the person in the Great Hall with the gargoyle?" "That would be Corbin Penvellyn, Eleanor's grandson. It is rumored that he returned to Blackmoor so he could secretly continue her experiments in the mystical arts." "Why doesn't he have a coat of arms?" "He does. It's in France," Nigel said. "I can get you a copy of it, if you help me out." Nancy frowned. It sounded like she was going to be forced to do someone else's chores again. "Sure, what do you want?" "I'm in dire need of a typist," Nigel said. "I wrote out my memoirs by hand, and I need to have them entered into the computer so I can send it to the publishers." "That doesn't sound so bad," Nancy said. Nigel pulled out a stack of 400 pieces of paper. "Fantastic! You can start now!" Chapter 9, The Creepy Ritual. Nigel's memoirs were the most boring thing Nancy had ever read. At least a third of it was dedicated to the weather, and the middle contained a 20-page digression about the texture of pudding. When Nancy finally finished with her job, she found a note from Nigel thanking her for her work. Attached to it was a photograph of Corbin's coat of arms, which had marks on the right and left. "Those indicate the directions I have to turn the gargoyle," Nancy immediately realized. Nancy's body suddenly made it known to her that it was well past midnight. Yawning, she got up and opened the library doors. She stumbled upon an incredibly strange scene. The manor was darkened, with the only light source coming from a candle in Ethel's hand. Ethel was standing behind Jane, and the two of them were walking down the stairs. Nancy hid behind a pillar to watch. Jane and Ethel were wearing elaborate jewelry, and they slowly chanted, "No key without toil, no fire without oil." They stopped at the center of the room, and Jane said, "My actions ensure that my name will endure to the end." Jane's hands moved, and Nancy could see she was pouring some sort of liquid on the ground. "Penvellyn," Jane whispered. Ethel looked on, smiling. The two of them then returned to Jane's room, chatting happily as they did so. "That was the freakiest thing I've ever seen," Nancy said. She checked her phone to see that it was 3:15 a.m. When she walked forward, she saw that there was a drain in the middle of the floor she hadn't noticed before. Nancy sniffed. It smelled like the liquid Jane poured into the drain was oil. In the middle of the night, Ethel and Jane dress up and start chanting so they can pour oil down a drain, Nancy said. "Forget solving the mystery of Linda being sick and grumpy. This is the real mystery at Blackmoor Manor." Nancy went upstairs to confront Jane and Ethel, but the two of them had disappeared. Confused and tired, Nancy went to her room and fell asleep. The next day, Jane's room was locked because she was in lessons, so Nancy couldn't get inside. She decided to investigate the gargoyle instead. She spun it according to the directions on Corbin's coat of arms, and a huge section of the wall retracted. "Whoa!" Nancy said. "Pretty complex technology for a guy who lived in the 1600s. She stepped into the newly opened area, which was a little dark. She used her phone to light up the area. Along the right wall was a peephole. Nancy peered inside, and it showed her Linda's room. Specifically, it gave her a view of Linda's desk. Kind of a pointless peephole, Nancy thought. That's when Linda's hairy hand came into view and picked up her bottle of skin moisturizer. Nancy gave a small scream. Linda was coarse and hairy, like a werewolf! Backing away from the peephole, Nancy saw that the only other part of the room was a plaque on the door to the left. The plaque said that something bad would happen to the curious wanderer who was not clever enough to solve the riddle. Linda didn't tell me about any riddle, Nancy said to herself. The riddle was simple enough. Nancy had to spell out Eleanor's name in runes, using the tiles below the plaque. The problem was that Nancy didn't know anything about runes. She took a few pictures of the available tiles with her phone's camera, then she left the hidden room. Nancy Drew, worst of Blackmoor Manor. This is a funny story. I hope you find it funny. I'm the guy who wrote it. I'm Arglefumph. Chapter 10. Runes. Nancy vaguely recalled seeing runes on the study guide in Jane's room, so she knocked on the door there. "We're in lessons right now," Ethel called. "I need to borrow Jane's book on runes. You can get it when the lessons are over." "You have time to do freaky rituals at 3:15 in the morning, but you don't have time to loan me a book?" Nancy said in her sassiest voice. There was a moment of tense silence after this. Then the door opened slightly. Nancy smirked in victory. Ethel threw the book directly at Nancy's head, then slammed the door in her face. Nancy fell over when the book smashed into her eyeball. "Ow!" Nancy said. "Thanks for the book, but be more gentle next time." Nancy picked up the book and flipped to the section on letters. She took it to the hidden gargoyle passageway and spelled out the name Eleanor. This caused the doorway to open on the wall opposite of Linda's room. "There's a hidden passageway in the hidden passageway?" Nancy wondered. She wandered through the doorway and soon found herself falling down several flights of stairs. "Ow! Ow! Ow!" Nancy cried. Figuring she was underneath the house now, she got off of the ground and explored. The hallway had smooth blank walls, probably because no one ever visited this part of the manor. Nancy marveled at how clean and dust-free the ancient passageways were when she came to a dead end. In the corner of the wall was a metal plate with a triangle on the cover. She opened the cover to see a series of 6 triangles. She fiddled around with them until they were all facing upwards, like the triangle on the cover. When she was done, nothing happened. "This is boring," she said. She turned around and climbed the stairs, only falling twice along the way. Soon she was back inside the well-lit hallways of Blackmoor Manor. Nancy stood up straight. She was finally ready to... What was she supposed to do again? Nancy opened up her task list and started checking off the things she had already done. She stopped when she saw the first item on the list. Check in with Mrs. Drake once I unpack. "Oh, geez, I was supposed to meet with Mrs. Drake when I first arrived," Nancy said. She stuffed her notebook into her purse and ran down to the bottom floor of Blackmoor Manor. She tried the wrong door before finding the door to the conservatory. Nancy was impressed by the change of scenery. The conservatory was humid and full of plants. It was well lit, and as Nancy walked down the stairs, she saw an admirable concrete pond with a fancy frog tile decoration above it. On the far end of the room, away from the stairs, Mrs. Drake was watering plants. "Hey, Mrs. Drake," Nancy said. "All settled in? Good. I know how much you teenagers love your televisions and loud stereos, so I must insist that you act civilly and quietly while you are visiting Linda. Jane is having her lessons, and she mustn't be disturbed," Mrs. Drake lectured. "Got it. Anything else I should know? The kitchen is being remodeled, so if you wish to eat something, you will have to order it from the local pub. The phone line has been set up in your room. Feel free to order whatever you'd like." "Ooh, great! I haven't eaten anything in over 2 days," Nancy said. Mrs. Drake looked at her strangely. She's probably looking strangely because there's a typo here. Oh my gosh. I put down the local pub like I wasn't sure which word to use there. Chapter 11, Talking to Mrs. Drake. Nancy Drew was talking to Mrs. Drake, as the title says. Maybe I need to put a period after her name in the title as well. "So, what do you think is wrong with Linda?" "I don't know, and the doctors don't know. Nobody seems to know anything," Mrs. Drake said with a hint of frustration in her voice. "All I know is that Linda is unwell, and I am to look after the manor in her stead." Actually, I was trying to ask if... This is kind of a weird question. Has she always had super hairy arms? "No, of course not," Mrs. Drake said. "Why? Is there a problem with her arms? Did you see her behind the curtain?" "I only saw her hand, and it was covered with hair, like a werewolf." Mrs. Drake clicked with her mouth. "Please don't tell me you are falling for that ridiculous old story about the Blackmoor beast. I know you thought you saw something when you arrived, but I can assure you that Linda is not a lycanthrope." Nancy had no response because she had no idea what lycanthropy was. Oh, hey, that reminds me of a joke. What do you call a werewolf YouTuber? Like and subscribe! Instead of speaking, Nancy felt her upper lip, in order to confirm that the manor did not cause its residents to start growing hair spontaneously. "Okay, I don't have a mustache," Nancy said. "That means Linda's not a werewolf." "Excuse me?" Mrs. Drake asked. "You're excused," Nancy said, "but I have a question about Loulou the parrot. Do you know her magic word?" "Magic word? Oh, yes," Mrs. Drake said. "You see, my brother and father used to play a word game with Loulou. I never understood how it was played, but sometimes she'd grow sullen and refuse to play the game anymore until they told her that... Let's see, what was it again? It's on the tip of... Oh man, another typo. It's on the tip of my tongue. They'd have to tell her that Loulou is a very, very clever and beautiful bird." "Great, thanks," Nancy said. "There's one more thing I want to talk about, though. Ethel and Jane are dressing up in weird costumes and doing chant rituals at 3:15 in the morning in order to pour oil in the hole in the floor. You know about this, right?" Mrs. Drake threw Nancy out of the conservatory 20 seconds later. Chapter 12, Loulou's Magic Word. I guess Mrs. Drake is busy," Nancy said, brushing herself off as she got off the ground. She went upstairs and stopped by Loulou's cage. "Hey, Double Lou! I know the magic word." "You do?" "Loulou is a very, very clever and beautiful bird." Loulou made loud, happy sounds.
"Clever and beautiful! Too true! Too true! Loulou is clever and beautiful!"
"So, my word is barber," Nancy said.
"Leech! Leech, 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 leech!"
"Are you saying leech is the next word in the sequence?"
"You got it, Toots!"
Nancy went to the hidden passageway in the East Hall. At the parrot plaque, which read barber, she spun the dials, so it read leech. The plaque accepted this as correct, and the door opened. More passageways. Nancy muttered. She walked down this one, and at the end was a familiar-looking triangle puzzle. This time, the box with triangles was on the left side of the wall. Nancy opened it, and spun the triangles so they were all facing upwards. The wall spun to the side, revealing a large hidden room that conveniently connected both hidden passageways Nancy had found. The room had a door, a side passageway, and a tiny box in the wall. Nancy opened the box to find a glowing rock. "Hey, I can use this as a flashlight," Nancy said. "Hopefully it's not radioactive." Nancy stepped through the doorway and she found herself in a small room, about the size of an elevator. She opened the door at the other end of the room and went through. When the door closed behind her, she heard the room moving. "Huh?" Nancy asked. On a metallic fountain in front of her, Nancy could see a device. She picked it up to see that it had a map. "Solve the maze of the rotating rooms," was carved on the top of the map. "Uh-oh," Nancy said. Chapter 13, 8 hours later. 8 hours later, Nancy made it through the maze. Chapter 14, the Penvellyn family forge. At the other end of the maze was a locked door. A chemistry puzzle was built into the door, and at the top was a symbol of a snake eating its own tail. Nancy said. A snake eating its tail. I should find out what this means before solving the puzzle. Maybe Nigel knows about it? Nancy paused for a moment, then reconsidered. "Oh, no way am I going back through that maze again just to talk to Nigel," she decided. She pulled out her phone and did an internet search, which revealed that the symbols on the door all dealt with alchemy. She reconstructed the formulas according to the website, and the door opened to reveal the hidden Penvellyn Forge. Nancy knew this was the name of the room, because right next to the door was a small table with a homemade book entitled The Hidden Penvellyn Forge and You, by Alan Penvellyn. Intrigued, Nancy picked it up and began reading. "Hello, Jane. It's me, your Grandpa Alan. This is the big secret I was talking about. This room contains the treasure that our family's founder, Ranulph the Red, discovered oh so long ago. But before you can access it, there are a number of puzzles you have to solve first. Turn the page to learn more. If, for some reason, you are not a member of the Penvellyn family, please turn to page 87. Nancy turned to page 87. "Interloper! How dare you trespass on the Penvellyn family secrets? I am going to put the curse of Blackmoor Manor on you now. Soon you will become a werewolf. The only way to avoid this fate is to leave immediately and never tell anyone about it. If you believe in the curse of Blackmoor Manor, turn to the last page of the book. If not, turn to page 88. Nancy turned to the last page of the book. The end. Ugh, that's a bad ending, Nancy said. She went back a step and went to page 88. Okay, fine, you win. There's no such thing as the curse of Blackmoor Manor. Our ancestor Eleanor was not a witch. She was actually an alchemist. In fact, the alchemy puzzle on the door to this room was constructed by Eleanor centuries ago. People just made the wrong assumptions when she was secretly bringing in strange ingredients from all over the continent. The room you're standing in is the hidden Penvellyn Forge. The first Penvellyn, Ranulph the Red, hid his treasure inside this room to protect it. His grandchild, Milo, found the room and made a special lock to protect the treasure. His grandson found the room and crafted a puzzle to protect it. His grandson also found the room and crafted a puzzle to protect it. You get the idea. Every other generation, a Penvellyn discovers this room and crafts a puzzle to protect Ranulph's treasure. I was the 12th Penvellyn to enter this room since the 1300s. I made 2 separate puzzles to protect the treasure, one on my computer in the library, and one involving my beloved pet parrot, Loulou. Unfortunately, there's the small chance that the puzzles I created will become obsolete, if Loulou dies, or if someone decides to replace my newest model 1990 computer. In fact, if there is a non-Penvellyn reading this, that is probably what has happened. I do hope my granddaughter Jane will discover this room, but she is only 6 months old right now. Who knows what the future will hold for her? Dear reader, if there are any Penvellyns still alive, I beg you to take this book to them, so that they may discover the family secrets. If the line has died out, then I assign you with the task of solving the puzzles and retrieving Ranulph's treasure. The truth about our family should not remain lost to history. Yours sincerely, Alan Penvellyn. P.S. Please skip to page 10 for a description of all the various puzzles. Nancy Drew, Worst of Blackmoor Manor. This is Chapter 15, Alan's Computer Password. Nancy decided to tackle all of the puzzles in alphabetical order. Because hey, why not? First on the list was Alan Penvellyn, who set up a puzzle on his computer in the library. Nancy headed all the way to the library. Nigel was inside, typing furiously on his computer. Hey Nigel, Nancy said. Are you working on your memoirs? No, I'm doing a typing program, Nigel said. I hope to get my words per minute counter up by at least 10%. It's my New Year's resolution. It's good to have goals, Nancy said. I'm looking for Alan Penbellino's computer. Is it in here? It's in the back, Nigel said, gesturing towards the rear of the library. Nancy thanked Nigel and went to the computer. It was on a table under a large mask. Nancy moved the mouse around and the screen came to life. Welcome, Alan! Password? What's the password for the computer? Nancy asked. I have no idea, Nigel called from the other side of the library. I'm a historian. Modern people aren't really my bag, you know? I prefer my humanity to be more aged. Anyone under a century old is not interesting to me. He must not go on a lot of dates, Nancy decided. Nancy left the library and thought for a moment. If she wanted to learn the computer password, she would have to ask Jane, Linda, Mrs. Drake, or Loulou. Nancy decided to talk to them in alphabetical order, because hey, why not? She went upstairs to Jane's room and knocked on the door. Who is it? Jane called. It's Nancy, Nancy said. Please, come in, Jane said. Nancy entered the room and inquired about the password to Alan's computer. Jane grinned widely. I know the password, but if you want me to tell it to you, you have to play a game with me first. Nancy groaned. Which game? Jane pulled out 20 cards and put them on the floor. This is a matching game. You need to find all the matches, but if you make more than 10 mistakes, you have to start over. Nancy didn't do very well with the matching game until she got an idea. Pointing at a picture on Jane's desk, Nancy said, Whoa! You had a gerbil? Jane turned to look at the picture. Yes, its name was Freddy. It died about a year ago. While Jane was talking, Nancy quickly flipped over the cards and looked at them. She flipped them back over by the time Jane refocused her attention on the game. After that bit of cheating, Nancy had a much easier time winning the game. You did it, Jane said. Okay, the password on the computer is on Alan's coat of arms. Plain as day. But there's nothing on the computer that's very interesting. If you're looking for something to do, you should play a game with me instead. Maybe later, Nancy said. I'm all gamed out right now. Which coat of arms is Alan's again? The one with Loulou on it, Jane said. Nancy made her way downstairs and found the correct coat of arms, which read Pergamentum Exit. She went to Alan's computer and used that as the password. Thankfully, the computer accepted it. Welcome again, Alan! Are you ready to go on a ghost hunt? Yes, no? Nancy clicked on yes. Sorry, my watch tells me that it's currently daytime. The ghosts only come out after midnight. Please return later. Well, there is clearly nothing else I can do which is worthwhile, Nancy decided. So she went upstairs and slept until midnight. Chapter 16, The Ghost Hunt. Nancy woke up at midnight and she went downstairs. She was slightly impressed that all the lights in Blackmoor Manor were still on at full power. It must cost a lot of money to keep the manor running all the time. In the library, Nancy logged on to the computer again. This time, it accepted her request to go on a ghost hunt. The instructions appeared on screen. Don't tell my sister, but there are ghosts in Blackmoor. 13 of them to be exact. The problem is that they're very shy, so they only appear in quiet places like the library, the conservatory, and the Great Hall. What's worse, they'll only appear for a limited amount of time. But if you can find and touch all 13 ghosts in the time you're allotted, I'll give you a prize, one that I guarantee you'll enjoy. A timer appeared on screen below this message. She tripped over herself in her haste to start searching. She found a grand total of 3 ghosts before the timer ran out. This was the first of many attempts to find all the ghosts. First, Nancy found all the ghosts in the library. She reset the puzzle, then found all the ghosts in the Great Hall. She reset the puzzle again, then found all the ghosts in the hallway. Then she took a bathroom break and lost count of the ghosts she had found, so she started over. Eventually, Nancy found 12 ghosts. "Where is ghost number 13?" Nancy shouted in a very quiet voice that didn't wake anyone up. She soon noticed an odd spiral staircase in between her room and Jane's. Nancy walked up the stairs. Whoop! Wah! Ding! The stairs made weird sound effects as Nancy climbed up them. The stairs led to a dead end containing ghost number 13. Nancy quickly pressed it. Below the ghosts was a series of levers. Nancy pulled them, and they made weird sound effects, just like the stairs. Realizing this was another Penvellyn puzzle, Nancy tried duplicating the order of the sound effects. After some trial and error, she solved the puzzle and received a key. "Hooray!" Nancy said. "It's a key to somewhere!" Nancy slipped the key in her pocket and returned downstairs to Alan's computer. It had a special message waiting for her. "Congratulations! You're one of the few people who have seen all 13 ghosts of Blackmoor Manor! Now for your reward. In the East Hall, there is a lever disguised as a hat rack. Pull on it, then enjoy!" Nancy complained for a while about how the Penvellyns were forcing her to tramp all over their manor in the dead of night, before going to the East Hall. When she pulled the lever, a large section of the wall retracted, revealing a slide. Nancy sat herself down and started sliding. Whee! Nancy cheered as the slide spun around. On the wall, Nancy could see a strange-looking target. Before she had time to register this, the slide ended. She found herself downstairs, having exited through a hidden cache behind a statue. "I'm doing that again!" Nancy said. She ran upstairs and used the slide again. This time, instead of sitting down, she stood up on the slide. It was hard to keep her balance, and she almost fell over 3 times, but that way, she was able to punch the target. She heard a clanging sound before she smashed her head against the wall. Nancy immediately fell unconscious. Her last thought was about how standing up on a slide, which ends in a tunnel, is not a good idea. When Nancy awoke 7 hours later, she was on the floor of the Great Hall. A tiny watch piece was on the ground beside her. Standing over her, with an angry look on her face, was Ethel Bossany. Oh no, Nancy's in for it now! Chapter 17, Bridget's Box. Nancy quickly slipped the timepiece into her pocket. "Hello, Ethel," she said nervously. "What are you doing here?" Ethel asked. Sleeping?" "I told you not to go exploring in the manor," Ethel said, "and yet here I find you, at the base of one of the hidden passageways." "Yeah, the hidden slide is amazingly fun!" Nancy said enthusiastically. Hidden slide? What hidden slide? I didn't get myself knocked unconscious while standing on the hidden slide. I like sleeping on the hard tiled floors." "And this is exactly what I warned you about," Ethel said. "It is too dangerous for a girl of your capabilities to explore the manor. You will get hurt again if you keep this up. That is why you must desist immediately." "I'm not going to stop my investigation," Nancy said stubbornly. "You are here to determine why Linda is sick, not to hurt yourself playing with slides," Ethel said. "I cannot do anything now that you are here, but know this. The second your investigation is over, I will ensure that you are no longer welcomed at Blackmoor. Good day." Ethel turned around and marched off angrily. "Meanie bossy knees," Nancy called after her. Nancy slowly got off of the ground. Her body hurt a lot. then consulted the notebook. It said that Bridget Penvellyn had a telescope lens in the box in her room. Bridget's room was Nancy's bedroom, so she went directly there. As she passed by Jane's room, she heard singing. Bridget, with her eyes so bright, looks towards heaven at midnight. On the longest night of year, that's the time she holds most dear. Starry friends, she's often heard to say, how I wish that I could make you stay. Even though they can't remain, time will bring them round again. A song about Bridget, Nancy said to herself, thinking for a moment. Nah, that can't be a clue. It's probably just a coincidence. Fortunately, no one had moved Bridget's box for a few hundred years. It was sitting on a chair in the corner of the room. The box was a perfect six-sided cube, with each side containing an animal picture. Each face of the box had knobs, which let Nancy change the colors or cover things up to match various moon phases. What? Nancy asked. Nancy lay on her bed and she played around with the weird box for a while, until she noticed that there were star charts on the wall. She thumbed through them in search of the proper one. How do I know which season I'm looking for? Nancy complained. If only I had some sort of song to act as a clue. Nancy decided to forget the constellations and seasons, and she focused on the animals drawn on the star charts. Matching them up with the sides of the box, Nancy solved the puzzle. The box opened to reveal the telescope lens. Hooray! Nancy said. Then she realized she didn't have a telescope. Oh! She said. Nancy drew Worst of Blackmoor Manor, a story by Arglefumph, and read by him too. This is Chapter 18, The Telescope. The telescope lens must be used on the telescope in the room, Nancy read from her book of clues. It can also be used to unlock the moon piece. Wait, what moon piece? Nancy explored the room for a bit, and she found the proper indentation on the seat below one of the windows. She put the telescope lens inside the circular hole, then turned it. One of the plates retracted, revealing a puzzle. Nancy sighed. Why does every puzzle just lead to another puzzle? She asked no one in particular. This was another astronomy puzzle. Nancy recognized the signs for Gemini and Leo. She pulled out her phone and looked up her horoscope, which read, Today, you will solve a boatload of puzzles, do other people's chores, and almost get killed several times. I've had the same horoscope every day for the past several years, Nancy noted. She pressed the astronomy signs in order, and the wall retracted again. Inside the small alcove was a metallic piece shaped like the moon. Gotcha! Nancy said, slipping it into her pocket. It seemed to be about the same size as the clock piece she had gotten earlier. Perhaps the two were connected somehow. Nancy went to Jane's room and spoke with the young girl. Hey, Jane, there's a telescope stand in my room. Do you know what happened to the telescope? I took it outside to look at the stars, Jane said. If you want it back, you have to play a game with me. That's the rule. Suddenly, Nancy had a vision of Jane, 20 years in the future. Mummy, I'm hungry, said James, her 6-year-old child. Can I have some supper? Jane scolded her son. Not until you get a high score on Super Mario. That's the rule. But I keep losing. I haven't eaten in days. Please, just let me have some food. Whining again, James? For that, you'll have to play Model Match 10 times. No! Nancy shook her head. Jane, I am very concerned about your obsession with games, she said. However, because I have no other choice than to follow the commands of a 12-year-old, I will play your game. Hooray! Jane said. Jane produced a jigsaw puzzle, and she told Nancy to solve it in under 5 minutes. Nancy didn't understand why Jane thought it would be fun to watch someone else do a jigsaw puzzle, but she went along with it. The jigsaw puzzle was of a weird rabbit thing. Done, Nancy said when she finished. Great, Jane said. The telescope is on my desk. Nancy frowned upon learning she could have just taken the telescope at any time. She thanked Jane, then took the telescope to her room. Attaching the telescope lens to it, Nancy found that she was able to see hidden symbols in the mural. There were 5 symbols, all of which were numbered. Nancy didn't recognize them. "Seriously," Nancy whined. "Every puzzle leads to another puzzle. I'm not even part of the Penvellyn family. Can't they just give me the solution already?" Nancy's getting a little whiny. Chapter 19, Jane's Door Puzzle. Nancy skipped ahead in the book to the next Penvellyn. Charles said that each of the pillars in the main hall could be opened by a specific key. Someone with all the keys could open the pillars. That sounded like a surefire way to destroy the pillars and make the ceiling collapse on her, so Nancy skipped to the next page. Charles's other main accomplishment was creating the tapestry in Jane's room. He said the poem written on the tapestry was connected to the door. The biggest achievement in this guy's life was knitting? Nancy wondered. Glad I didn't live in the 1400s. It sounds boring. Nancy headed to Jane's room. To the right of the door was a lock, which required a key. Fortunately, Nancy had the correct key. She stuck it in the lock and... "It's stuck!" Nancy cried. Nancy took a closer look at the keyhole, grumbling the entire time. Clearly the keyhole was badly made if it didn't work after 600 years. Fortunately, the keyhole wasn't missing any parts. The parts were just old and refused to move. Some liquid would probably loosen them up. Since Nancy didn't have any WD-40 with her, she hawked up some fluid and spit in the keyhole. That got it to work perfectly. When I tell other people about this puzzle, I'll say I used butter that I got from dinner, Nancy decided to herself. Oh, and I'll make it seem like ordering food was a puzzle. That way I'll look like a smart detective. When she used the key, a staircase popped out so she could reach the tiles above Jane's door. It was a slider puzzle, and Nancy could see that she needed to move the tiles around so they were in the order indicated by the tapestry. "Forget slider puzzles," Nancy said. Instead of sliding the pieces into place, Nancy ripped the tiles off of the wall, then put them where they belonged. It was very simple. When I tell people about this, I'm going to pretend it was a ridiculously hard slider puzzle, Nancy decided. Solving the puzzle opened up a small compartment. Inside was a lightning bolt key for one of the pillars in the main hall. "Hooray!" Nancy said. "Only 3 more pillar keys to go." Chapter 20, The Statue of Mercury. The next set of puzzles that Nancy had to solve were from Eleanor Penvellyn, the woman who was rumored to be a witch. Her section of the book explained that the strange ghostly bells that were heard during her lifetime were actually part of a security system she built into the manor. It allowed someone to spy in the library by using the device in the hidden passageway. Needless to say, Nancy had no idea what Eleanor was talking about. Nancy headed back to the hidden passageway, behind the gargoyle. On the main floor level, she saw the side passageway in question. Nancy went through it, and she saw an odd statue. Its hands pointed out at her, and there was a peephole. Nancy checked the peephole. As promised, it let her see into the library. She couldn't see anything interesting besides the statue of Mercury in the corner. She double-checked the book. "If I press fingers on the left hand, the statue changes direction," Nancy said. "And if I press fingers on the right hand, the eyes of the statue change direction." Nancy tested it out while looking in the peephole. She could see the statue rotating, but she was too far away to see the eyes move. "Ah! Evil moving statue!" a voice shouted from above. Either Jane has been sucking in helium to make her voice high-pitched, or that's Nigel, Nancy decided. "Mommy! I need my mommy! Please help me!" Nigel screamed. Through the peephole, Nancy saw Nigel run away from his desk towards the door. He accidentally ran into the door and fell down. "The statue has cursed me for learning too much about the Penvellyn's secrets!" Nigel shouted. He got up, opened the door, then ran away, hooting like a howler monkey. "Awesome," Nancy said. She made her way back to the library. The statue was facing towards the peephole, so she could easily take the wand key in Mercury's hand. When she reached for it, she found it was stuck. Huh? Let go, Mercury! Eventually, she realized she couldn't take the wand because Mercury's eyes were looking down at her. She had to go all the way back to the hidden room and try a different finger. This time, she pressed the finger which made Mercury's eyes face left. Nancy had to go back and forth between the library and the hidden room in her quest to figure out which finger made his eyes turn upwards. After the 5th trip, she got frustrated and picked up a heavy book. She used it to break the arm off of the statue. Picking the wand from the crumbled statue remains, Nancy said, "Hooray! That's the 4th pillar key! I only have to find 2 more!" Nancy drew Worst of Blackmoor Manor, a story by Arglefumph. Chapter 21, Froggies! Nancy was proud of the progress she was making. The book said that the next pillar key was hidden by John Penvellyn, who built a frog puzzle on top of Thomas's underground well puzzle. "My life is unnecessarily complicated," Nancy complained as she re-entered the hidden passageways of Blackmoor Manor. By now, it felt like she had been spending an eternity solving the puzzles surrounding the Penvellyn family forge. She kind of wished she could go back to investigating why Linda was turning into a werewolf. The underground well was near the entrance to the horrific maze. On the door of the well was a box with a triangle puzzle. Nancy had to move triangles around 3 different sized cups until one cup had 4 triangles in it. "Oh, I hate these kinds of puzzles," Nancy said, referring to the kind of puzzle that forced her to think. She started pressing the 3 buttons randomly, and after about 5 minutes, she stumbled upon the solution by chance. Nancy did a happy dance, then went upstairs for the second half of the puzzle. Now that the well was full, she could use the hose in the conservatory to solve the frog puzzle. The hose ended up being a spray hose. Nancy picked it up and started spraying everywhere. "Whee, this is fun!" Nancy said. "I'm making rainbows!" "My dear child," Mrs. Drake said angrily, "you should not spray the hose haphazardly like that. You're getting water all over the—" Mrs. Drake was cut off when Nancy blasted her with the hose. She screamed and ran upstairs to get a towel. Once she was finished having fun, Nancy focused her attention on the frog mural. When she sprayed a tile next to the frog jumped to that tile. The book said she had to find a safe passageway for the frog to reach the princess on the left-hand side. The clue said to avoid the tiles next to the boat, the trees, and the lily pads. "So, I need to avoid all of the tiles? That doesn't make sense," Nancy noted. She played the puzzle a few times, but every time she did, she got eaten by the randomly appearing alligators of doom. Eventually, Nancy got mad and sprayed the entire board at once. That caused the game to mess up, and it automatically gave her the endgame reward, the helmet key. That is, one of the frog statues opened its mouth, and it spit the key out onto the floor. "Ew," Nancy said. Chapter 22, Getting the Crank. Nancy only had 1 more pillar key to find. The book said that Penny hid it inside her machine. The book failed to mention where this machine was, though, which made the clue extremely unhelpful. What if they got rid of it years ago? That would make the entire puzzle impossible to solve, Nancy said. After a lot of wandering around and wondering why she came to England but never went outside, Nancy found a creepy crank-operated machine in the corner of the Great Hall. The machine featured a mechanical woman who flipped cards. There was a label which said Penny, so Nancy guessed this was the machine she needed. Nancy tried to start it, but the mechanical woman started randomly wigging out. Nancy groaned, then went to Mrs. Drake. "Hey, Miss Old British Lady," Nancy said, "the mechanical card game in the Great Hall is broken." "It's not broken. I removed its crank, as it was proving to be too much of a distraction for Jane," Mrs. Drake said. "How did you know I had it?" "When I think of crank, I think of you," Nancy said. "Can you let me borrow it?" "Tell you what, I have a series of seedlings that need to go into the box there. While you put them into place, I will go up to my room and retrieve the crank. That way we will both be happy, if you get my meaning." Nancy blanched. She disliked put a bunch of items into a small spot puzzles almost as much as doing other people's chores. Putting plants in a box seemed very much like doing Mrs. Drake's chores, now that Nancy thought about it. But before she could protest, Mrs. Drake left the room saying, "Remember, they must all fit into that box!" Nancy tried her hand at the puzzle. She could get most of the seedlings into place, but the two final ones refused to fit. Nancy thought long and hard about what to do. Then she grabbed the seedlings and threw them into the giant monster plant by the side of the table. "Now there aren't any seedlings left over," Nancy said confidently. But just in case, she took the crank away from Mrs. Drake before the older woman got a chance to look at the plants. What a surprise. Nancy cheated on that puzzle just like all the others. Chapter 23, Lighting the Forge. Nancy put the crank in Penny's machine and wound it up. Before the game started, Nancy had the opportunity to select symbols. "Hey, those are the symbols I saw on the wall in Bridget's room," Nancy said. "That puzzle wasn't a huge waste of time after all." Nancy pressed the symbols in the proper order. A small patch on the top of the machine flipped over, revealing the key. "Ah, I know what this is," Nancy said. "I need to win this game of Go Fish in order to get the key from her." The machine moved rather slowly, to the point that it would probably take 3 minutes, minimum, to play a complete game. Nancy decided that was too long for her, so she reached over and grabbed the key. "That's the last one," she said. "Now for the pillars." The 6 keys opened up the 6 pillars in the Great Hall. Each pillar had a movable pipe inside. Nancy correctly guessed that she needed to rotate the pipes so they all connected. The book said that this would allow the passage of oil to the forge. Really, couldn't I have taken some oil down to the forge myself? That would have been so much simpler than this, Nancy thought. But of course, getting the pipes in place wasn't the end of the puzzle. Corbin Penvellyn set up a puzzle which decreed that you had to tap all 3 gargoyles on the forehead with Mercury's wand, then tap the forge to light it. Nancy had to search for the 3 gargoyles. One was downstairs near the hidden slide. Another one was inside the room with the burping dragon. The final gargoyle was guarding the entrance to the secret passageway by Linda's room. Whenever Nancy tapped the wand to a gargoyle, its eyes glowed. She tapped all 3 gargoyles, and nothing happened. "Shoot, it's a time challenge," Nancy said. She then started sprinting all over the manor, in hopes of touching all 3 gargoyles within the 10-second limit. Seeing as the route required her to run up a flight of stairs and down again, this was basically impossible. She collapsed with exhaustion after the 12th attempt. "Curse you, Corbin Penvellyn!" It never occurred to Nancy that she should try going to the gargoyles by another route. Eventually, when she was all rested, Nancy went down to the Great Hall and stopped at the pipe in the floor. She lit a match and dropped it down the pipe. "There, now the forge is lit," she said. Chapter 24, The Treasure Revealed. Nancy went all the way through the hidden passageways, including the dreaded maze puzzle, for what she hoped was the last time. The pipes were in place and the forge was lit. Now all she had to do was forge something. It didn't take too long for Nancy to realize she made a mistake somewhere. The forge was lit, but there was no air going to it. "Arg!" Nancy cried. "Who builds a huge metal forge underneath their house anyway? Didn't anyone realize this is a fire hazard?" Fortunately, getting air to the forge would not require Nancy to go very far. In one of the corners of the room was a raised area with a puzzle. The puzzle allowed Nancy to move an Aeolus character in various directions in order to capture the winds. The puzzle was directly connected to a real-life statue of Aeolus inside the forge. Nancy thought this was unnecessarily complicated. The puzzle was a bit complicated too. Whenever Nancy moved Aeolus, the winds changed positions, making it hard for her to capture them. In order to get around this, she pressed the wind tiles against the board so they couldn't move. She quickly got all the winds in place after that. "Okay, now the forge is working," Nancy said. She took a final look at the book, which told her that she had to make a key with the forge in order to unlock the area with the Penvellyn family treasure. The key had to be made in a very special formation, which was based on the book, and Jane's room, and the various Penvellyn coats of arms. Instead of doing the puzzle properly, Nancy scoffed. The goal of all these puzzles was to make a key? What a waste! I'm a master lockpicker! Nancy took out her lockpicking kit and fiddled with the lock on the wall. The lock sprung open, and Nancy was able to look inside the small alcove to see the famous Penvellyn treasure. This was it! She had been working for days trying to get this treasure so she could sell it online and make enough money to afford a plane ticket back home. The treasure, protected for over 600 years, was finally going to be revealed! It was a rock. This is Nancy Drew, Worst of Blackmoor Manor. Chapter 25, The Culprit Revealed. Nancy's long string of curses was interrupted by the appearance of Jane. Whatever you just found, it's mine, Jane said. I'm the Penvellyn, not you, and besides, I would have found it first if I didn't have to learn all that other garbage. What? Nancy asked. The 12-year-old was the culprit? Our family treasure is a rock? No way, Jane said. There must be something under it. Jane grabbed the rock, which was connected to a tripwire. Nancy dived out of the way as a large iron box fell down from the ceiling and trapped Jane. Nancy, help! Get me out of here! Jane cried. I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for everything. You should apologize for making me do all those games, Nancy said. No, I mean, I'm sorry for what I did to Linda. She's not really turning into a werewolf. I just fed her pills and hair restorer to make her sleepy and hairy. I want her to go away so it could be just me and Mummy, my real Mummy. Another mystery solved, Nancy complimented herself. Nancy figured she could rescue Jane by using the large Aeolus statue. She pressed the buttons to make it move, but it stayed in place. Huh? Why isn't this working? It was fine just a few minutes ago, Nancy said. The statue looked down at her. I'm not going to help you, Nancy, it said. What? Nancy cried. You've been cheating your way through all of the puzzles here, the statue reprimanded. You broke the Mercury statue, you got water all over the conservatory, and you lied to Ethel. Why, I don't think you did one puzzle legitimately. Hey, it's not my fault, Nancy said. These puzzles are really hard. Well, I'm not going to let you cheat on the final puzzle, the statue said. You have to figure out a way to free Jane without my help. But I'm not smart enough to do that. Then I guess Jane is going to die, the statue said. She only has 5 minutes of air left. Can you solve the puzzle in time? No! Nancy cried. Second chance! Second chance! Where's the second chance button? I did not remember having a magical talking statue in this story. Huh. Chapter 26. Nancy needs less stress in her life. Nancy tried pulling the box handles again, but to no use. She wasn't strong enough to lift a heavy metal box. There's no air in here! I can't breathe! Jane pleaded. I'm trying, Nancy grunted. She dumped her purse upside down on the ground, in hopes that it would have something useful. She had 2 keys, the pillar pieces, a slice of butter, a glowing rock, a paper from Nigel, and a container of hot pink nail polish. There's nothing that would help save Jane. Nancy tried using her phone to call for help, but there was no reception. She kicked the box and received a stubbed toe as a result. I can't lift it! This thing is too heavy! Nancy said, almost crying with frustration. Stupid, stupid Penvellyns! Why did they set up so many death traps in their puzzle manor? Nancy's grip on reality started to slacken as she began ranting about the Penvellyns. Do the Penvellyns all hate their grandchildren? Is that why they built this torture manor? Half the puzzles depend on nothing in the manor being changed or moved, while the other half depend on dumb coincidences. Arrgh! Loulou the parrot has more personality and charm than all 200 of the Penvellyns put together, and she can't even move her mouth when she talks. Hugh says he's in Rome on a business trip, but I know the truth. He took the first excuse possible to get the heck out of here. Why would anyone want to live with the world's most boring historian and a creepy old woman who talks to plants more often than she talks to people? I'd run away, but I can't because there's a cloaked figure and a werewolf waiting to kill anyone who sets foot outside the manor. That was me, actually, Jane said. I dressed up in the cloak so I would look like Eleanor. I thought it would scare Linda. And those glowing eyes you saw work on a remote switch. Why would you set up glowing eyes to scare someone you don't know? Nancy yelled. It seemed like a good idea at the time, Jane said. That's what I mean, Nancy said. All the Penvellyns are not so secretly crazy. It's probably because they've been taught by the weirdo Bossany family for the past 400 years. Ethel is the worst, creepiest tutor I've ever met, and I'm not talking about her out-of-proportion body parts. The door to the room opened, revealing an angry Ethel Bossany. What did you say? She asked. A wave of relief washed over Nancy. Ethel's creepy ability to appear out of nowhere had finally become useful for once. Ethel, Nancy said, I need your help. Jane is in danger. Together, Ethel and Nancy lifted the metal box off of the ground about an inch to let fresh air inside. Ethel ran to get Mrs. Drake, and all three women were able to tip the box over and save Jane. I guess I thought it was nice to let Mrs. Drake in on the Penvellyn family secrets. Yeah, it's kind of a shame she doesn't learn about that stuff in the actual game. Chapter 27, The Curse is Broken. Nancy dropped the Penvellyn meteorite on the bed. Here. What is that? Linda asked. The Penvellyn family treasure, Nancy said. The source of all their evil powers, which has been protected for centuries. It's a rock, Linda said. Exactly! Nancy said. I've been running around for 3 days solving a ridiculous series of British puzzles just to get a rock. So if you don't get out of bed this instant, I am going to scream. I can't be seen, Nancy. I've been cursed. There's no curse, Linda. The Penvellyns don't have magic powers. All they have is a rock. And if you don't leave your bed right now, I'm throwing it at you. Okay, I'm leaving, Linda said. She pulled back the curtains and got out of bed. Thank you, Nancy said. Oh, and by the way, Jane confessed to everything. What? The weird feelings you've been having? It's because Jane's been slipping Mrs. Drake's allergy pills into your food. I don't know how she did that, seeing as all the food here is made and delivered by the Boar's Head pub, but whatever. She's lucky you didn't die from what she did. I've been getting allergy pills? Linda asked. I guess that would explain why my body feels off. But what about all the hair growing on my arms? Jane put hair restorer in your hand lotion. She also put that curse in your room, Nancy said. Why? Linda asked. Why would Jane go to such great lengths to harm me? She thinks you're a bad stepmother, and she wants to be with her real mom, Nancy said. Also, I suspect that anyone who lives in the manor for a long period of time goes a little crazy. You should have seen some of the stuff they set up to protect their treasure. Nigel poked his head through the door. Did I hear someone mention treasure? Have you discovered the Penvellyn family secret? You must tell me so I can put it in my book. Sorry, Nigel, Nancy said. It turns out that the Penvellyns are just puzzle-loving recluses. There's no such thing as magic. Nancy then picked up her purse, which holds over 500 different items, and left the room. Chapter 28, The End. Dear Ned, I know I should be happy that I solved the mystery, but for some reason, I'm not. To be honest, it feels like my life is going in circles. I mean, this is the 10th time that I solved a series of puzzles that someone set up 100 years ago in order to protect a fabulous treasure. It's getting a little boring at this point. I'd like to take a break and go on vacation, except whenever I do that, I stumble across another mystery. Hugh eventually returned to Blackmoor Manor. He, Linda, and Jane have pledged to work through their problems as a family. I'm not sure how they'll do that, seeing as the problem is Jane almost killed her stepmother, but I wish them the best of luck. Nigel's history book about the Penvellyns was a huge failure, mostly because he spent 3 whole chapters describing the Mercury statue. On the other hand, Nigel's autobiography sold surprisingly well. The British Institute for Insomniacs has ordered over 5,000 copies. As for the other people I met, I'm told that Mrs. Drake and Ethel are teaming up to make a rap album entitled Potting and Plotting. It sounds interesting. I'm proud to report that I've also solved the mystery of how I'll get home when I don't have enough money for a flight. A nice man named Sherlock Holmes hired me as his part-time assistant. We solved 4 cases together, and he gave me a bonus which covered the airfare home. He said it was a reward for my work, but I think he wanted to get rid of me as soon as possible because he's jealous of my mystery-solving skills. See you soon. Love, Nancy. Okay, that's the end of Nancy Drew, Worst of Blackmoor Manor. Hope you enjoyed my silly story, everybody. Bye.